Anonymous photos of my wife with another man destroyed everything I believed about my 14-year marriage. When I confronted her slick lawyer in his office, I watched him start shaking the moment I said, "I'm her husband." What began as simple adultery turned into something far worse, a federal crime that would send shockwaves through our entire community. She thought she was playing chess, but she picked the wrong man to cross. My name is Warren Whitman. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 15 years building a small logistics company from the ground up. 10 trucks, reliable drivers, steady contracts hauling freight across America. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and kept my family comfortable in our suburban home outside Denver. The morning that changed everything started like any other Tuesday in March. I was in my office going over delivery schedules when my assistant knocked and said there was an envelope for me at the front desk. No return address, just my name written in block letters I didn't recognize. Inside was a single photograph that made my blood run cold. My wife, Bethany, dressed in a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, was sitting at some upscale bar downtown. Her hand was resting on the thigh of a younger man, probably early 30s, clean-cut, expensive suit. They were looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. I flipped the photo over. Someone had scrawled a message in the same block handwriting. "This isn't the first time. You deserve to know." My hand started shaking as I stared at the image. Bethany had been working late more often recently, always some excuse about client meetings or office emergencies. She was a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized firm downtown, and I trusted her completely when she said the job demanded long hours. I tried calling her cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The sound of her cheerful recorded voice made me want to throw the phone across the room. 20 minutes later, another knock at my door. This time, it was a delivery driver holding a small package addressed to me. No return address again. Inside was a flash drive. I plugged it into my computer with trembling fingers. One video file, dated just 3 days ago. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Bethany walking into the lobby of the downtown Marriott with the same man from the photograph. They weren't acting like business associates. They were holding hands, laughing, completely comfortable with each other. The timestamp showed they'd entered at 2:30 p.m. on a day when Bethany had told me she was in back-to-back meetings until evening. I sat there staring at the frozen image on my screen, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. 14 years of marriage, 2 kids who adored their mother, and this is what it had come to. My 14-year-old son Mason was dealing with enough problems at school without this mess exploding his family. And 12-year-old Lily still believed her parents were going to be together forever. Someone wanted me to know the truth about my wife. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo of Bethany with her hand on another man's leg. I kept the flash drive locked in my office safe, but the images were burned into my memory. The next morning, I was nursing my 3rd cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a man in an expensive gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. I'd never seen him before in my life. I opened the door, and he immediately straightened his tie. "Mr. Warren Whitman?" he asked, his voice crisp and professional. "That's me," I replied, studying his face. Something about his demeanor made my gut clench. "My name is Preston Vale. I'm an attorney representing your wife, Bethany Whitman," he said, extending a business card. "She's requested that all future communication between you and her go through my office." The words hit me like a sledgehammer, but I kept my expression neutral. So this was how she wanted to play it, blindside me with a lawyer before I even knew what was happening. "Is that so?" I said, crossing my arms. "And what exactly does my wife need a lawyer for?" Preston opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. "I have some documents here that require your immediate attention. Perhaps we could discuss this inside." I stepped back and gestured him into my living room. He sat on the edge of the couch like he was ready to bolt at any second. "Mr. Whitman," Preston began, opening the folder, "your wife has filed for divorce. These papers outline the initial terms she's proposing." I took the documents and scanned the first page. Divorce petition. She was asking for half of everything, including my trucking business, plus alimony and primary custody of Mason and Lily. She didn't have the guts to tell me herself, I said, looking up at the lawyer. Preston shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Whitman felt it would be better to handle this through legal channels to avoid any unnecessary conflict. I set the papers down and leaned back in my chair. "Tell me something, Preston. How long has my wife been planning this? Because it seems awfully convenient that she'd file for divorce right after. I paused, watching his face carefully. Certain activities came to light. The lawyer's composure faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mr. Whitman. I think you know exactly what I'm referring to, I said, my voice steady but cold. The question is whether Bethany told you about her boyfriend, or if you found out some other way. Preston's hands gripped the briefcase handle tighter. Mr. Whitman, I'm simply here to deliver legal documents. Any other matters should be discussed through proper channels. I stood up, towering over the nervous attorney. Here's what's going to happen, Preston. You're going to go back to my wife and tell her that if she wants a war, she's picked the wrong man to fight. And you might want to ask her about Troy Hendricks before you agree to represent her any further. At the mention of the name, Preston's face went pale. So he didn't know. Have a good day, counselor, I said, opening the front door. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. 2 days later, I walked into Preston Vale's law office at exactly 10 in the morning. The receptionist, a young woman with nervous eyes, directed me to a conference room where Preston was already waiting. He looked like he hadn't slept much since our last meeting. Mr. Whitman, Preston said, half standing as I entered. Thank you for coming in to discuss the terms. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him, maintaining steady eye contact. Before we talk about terms, I said, my voice calm but firm, I need to make something clear. I'm her husband. The moment those words left my mouth, Preston's composure completely shattered. His hand started shaking so violently that he had to put down his pen. The color drained from his face, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Mr. Whitman, he stammered, I understand this is a difficult situation. Do you? I leaned forward, watching him squirm. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and my wife thought you could steamroll right over me. Did she tell you about the hotel visits? The expensive dinners? Or did she conveniently leave out those details? Preston's breathing became shallow. I'm not sure what you're implying. I pulled out a manila envelope and placed it on the table between us. I'm not implying anything, counselor. I'm stating facts. Bank records showing withdrawals that coincide with her little dates. Hotel receipts. Photos. Video evidence. His hands were shaking so badly now that he couldn't even pretend to look at the documents I'd brought. Your client has been living a double life. I continued, my voice steady and controlled. She's been using our joint accounts to fund her affair while planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've built. That's not just adultery, Preston. That's fraud. Preston tried to compose himself, loosening his tie. Mr. Whitman, even if there were irregularities in the marriage, that doesn't necessarily impact the divorce proceedings. I laughed, cold and bitter. Irregularities? Is that what we're calling it when a wife steals from her husband to pay for hotel rooms with her boyfriend? I'll need to review these allegations with my client, Preston said, his voice barely above a whisper. You do that, I said, standing up. And Preston, when you talk to Bethany, remind her that I know everything. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every moment she spent with Troy Hendricks. If she wants to play hardball, she just picked a fight with the wrong trucker. Preston's face went even paler at the mention of Troy's name. He fumbled with his papers, clearly desperate for me to leave. Have a good day, counselor, I said, walking toward the door. I'm sure my lawyer will be in touch soon. As I left his office, I could hear Preston frantically dialing his phone. Good. Let him warn Bethany that her husband wasn't going down without a fight. That afternoon, I got a call that made my blood boil even more than the divorce papers. Mason's school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, needed to see me immediately about an incident in the cafeteria. When I arrived at Lincoln High School, I found my 14-year-old son sitting outside the principal's office with a split lip and bruised knuckles. A smaller kid sat across from him, holding an ice pack to his eye. What happened? I asked Mason directly. Mason looked up at me with anger I'd never seen before. Tommy Morrison was running his mouth about Mom. He said, his voice tight with emotion, said she was cheating on you, and the whole school knew about it. My heart sank. The rumors were already spreading, which meant other kids had heard their parents talking. Mason was defending his mother's honor while I was gathering evidence to destroy it in court. Mrs. Patterson, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gestured for me to step into her office. Mr. Whitman, I'm afraid this is the third fight Mason's been in this week. His grades are slipping, and his teachers report that he's been aggressive and unfocused. Has anyone talked to him about what's happening at home? I asked. That's actually why I called you, she said gently. Mason mentioned that his parents are having problems, and he's clearly struggling to process it. We have counselors who specialize in helping children cope with family transitions. I rubbed my face, feeling the weight of everything crashing down. Mrs. Patterson, my son doesn't know the full story yet. His mother and I are working through some issues. I understand, she said. But whatever's happening between you and your wife, Mason is paying the price. He's a good kid who's trying to hold his family together by fighting anyone who says otherwise. When I brought Mason home, he went straight to his room and slammed the door. Lily was at a friend's house, blissfully unaware that her world was falling apart. I knocked on Mason's door. Son, we need to talk. Go away, came the muffled response. Mason, open this door right now, I said firmly. We're going to have a man-to-man conversation. After a moment, the door opened. Mason stood there looking older than his 14 years, his eyes red from crying. Is it true? He asked quietly. What Tommy said about Mom. I looked at my son, this young man who was ready to fight the world to defend his family, and made a decision. He deserved honesty, not comfortable lies. Sit down, son, I said, closing the door behind me. There are some things you need to know. The next morning, I was reviewing dispatch schedules when my phone started buzzing nonstop. Text messages, missed calls, Facebook notifications. Something big was happening. When I opened Facebook, my blood turned to ice. Bethany had posted a long, emotional status update with a photo of herself looking distraught. Sometimes you realize you've been trapped in a loveless marriage with someone who doesn't care about your happiness or emotional needs. After years of trying to make things work, I've finally found the courage to stand up for myself and my children. To those who want to judge me without knowing the full story, please remember that there are always two sides to every situation. I'm just trying to rebuild my life and find some peace. The comments section was exploding. Friends, neighbors, even people I barely knew were offering their sympathy and support. You're so brave, Bethany. You deserve happiness. Some men just don't appreciate what they have. My phone rang. It was Wade Morrison, an old friend who had worked as a detective before starting his own security business. Warren, Wade said without preamble, I just saw Bethany's post. What the hell is going on? She's trying to control the narrative. I replied, pacing my office. Making herself look like the victim before the truth comes out. What truth? Wade asked. I told him everything. The photos, the videos, the hotel receipts, the stolen money. Wade listened without interrupting. Jesus, Warren, he said finally. You've got a real mess on your hands. But if you've got solid evidence, we can use it. I need your help, Wade, I said. I need someone who knows how to dig deeper, find things I might have missed. Consider it done, Wade replied. But Warren, if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. Bethany's already painted you as the bad guy. One wrong move, and it'll look like you're harassing her. That afternoon, I got a call from Lily's school. My 12-year-old daughter had been found crying in the bathroom, telling her teacher that kids were saying her mommy was going to take her away from Daddy. When I picked her up, Lily's eyes were red and puffy. Daddy, she whispered as I buckled her seatbelt, are you and Mommy getting divorced? The question hit me like a physical blow. I've been so focused on gathering evidence and fighting legal battles that I hadn't prepared for this moment. Lily, sweetheart, I said, turning to face her, Mommy and Daddy are having some problems right now. But no matter what happens, we both love you and Mason more than anything in the world. But Rachel's parents got divorced, and now she only sees her daddy on weekends, Lily said, fresh tears streaming down her face. I don't want to only see you on weekends. I reached back and took her small hand in mine. Baby girl, I promise you that I will fight with everything I have to make sure that never happens. You and your brother are the most important things in my life. That evening, Mason came to me with his phone in his hand. Dad, Mom's post is everywhere. Kids at school are sharing it and making comments. Some are defending her, but others are asking questions. I looked at the screen. The post had over 200 likes and 50 comments. My wife was building a public case against me while I sat on evidence that could destroy her story. Dad, Mason said quietly, when are you going to tell people what really happened? It was time to stop playing defense. Bethany won a public war, and she was about to get one. 2 days after Bethany's social media ambush, I was ready to return fire. Wade had worked his magic, uncovering financial records that painted a clear picture of systematic theft. But before I went public, I wanted to give her one last chance. I called Bethany's phone, knowing she probably wouldn't answer. Sure enough, it went to voicemail. "Bethany," I said after the beep, "this is Warren. I've seen your Facebook post, and I think you should know that I have bank records, hotel receipts, and surveillance footage of you in Troy. If you want to make this public, I'm ready to show everyone exactly what kind of person you really are. Call me back if you want to handle this privately." She never called back. That evening, I sat down on my computer and wrote my own post. I usually don't air personal business on social media, but when someone makes public accusations, the truth deserves to be heard. For the past 6 months, my wife has been having an affair while using our joint accounts to fund a relationship. I have bank statements, hotel receipts, and photographic evidence. I try to handle this privately, but when lies are spread publicly, facts must follow. I will always protect my children and fight for what's right. I attached 3 carefully selected bank statements showing large withdrawals on dates that matched hotel stays, along with a photo of Bethany and Troy entering the Marriott. I made sure faces were visible, but kept it tasteful enough for social media. Within an hour, the post had 50 likes and 20 comments. People were shocked, angry, and suddenly very interested in hearing my side of the story. My phone started ringing immediately. The first call was from my sister Janet in California. "Warren, oh my God," she said. "I can't believe Bethany would do this to you and the kids." "Believe it," I replied grimly. "She's been planning this for months." The second call was from Preston Vale, sounding more panicked than ever. "Mr. Whitman," he said, "this social media situation is getting out of hand. Perhaps we should discuss an amicable settlement before things escalate further." "Settlement?" I laughed. "Preston, your client started this war when she decided to steal my money and destroy my family. Now she gets to deal with the consequences." "But the children," he said desperately. "Think about Mason and Lily." "I'm thinking about them," I replied coldly. "That's why I'm making sure their mother doesn't get away with fraud and manipulation. Those kids deserve to know the truth about who their parents really are." By midnight, Bethany's original post had been flooded with new comments. People were asking hard questions, demanding explanations, and sharing my post as a response to hers. The tide of public opinion was shifting fast. Wade called around 1 in the morning. "Warren, you stirred up a hornet's nest. Bethany's been deleting comments and trying to damage control, but it's too late. The cat's out of the bag." "Good," I said. "Let her try to explain away bank records and hotel receipts. Truth has a way of cutting through lies." The war was officially on, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was winning. 3 days after my social media counterattack, I received a phone call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but urgent. "Mr. Whitman, this is Detective Sarah Collins with Denver PD. I believe you might have information relevant to an ongoing investigation." My stomach dropped. "What kind of investigation?" "We've been tracking a fraud scheme involving fake investment opportunities," Detective Collins explained. "Troy Hendricks, the man your wife has been seeing, is a person of interest. We understand you have financial records that might help our case." I sat down heavily in my office chair. "Detective, I have bank statements showing my wife transferred thousands of dollars to Troy. I thought it was just her funding their affair." "Mr. Whitman, we believe Troy has been running a romance scam on multiple women, convincing them to invest in fake business ventures. Your wife might be both an accomplice and a victim." 20 minutes later, Detective Collins was sitting in my office reviewing the evidence Wade and I had compiled. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who took notes on everything. "This is exactly what we needed," she said, studying the bank records. "Troy's been promising women huge returns on investments in his supposed logistics company. He targets married women, seduces them, then convinces them to steal from their husbands to fund his schemes." "So Bethany was just another mark?" I asked. "Possibly," Detective Collins replied. "But the amounts involved suggest she knew more than she's letting on. We'll need to interview her." That afternoon, I got an emergency call from Mason's school. My son had been found in the parking lot confronting a group of older boys who'd been spreading rumors about his mother. When I arrived, Mason was sitting in the principal's office with a bloody nose and torn shirt. The other boys were nowhere to be seen. What happened? I asked, kneeling beside his chair. They were saying Mom was a criminal, Mason said angrily. That she was going to jail, and we'd have to live in foster care. I wasn't going to let them talk about our family like that. Principal Adams, a stern man in his 60s, looked at me seriously. Mr. Whitman, Mason fought off 3 boys who were significantly larger than him. He's been through enough trauma lately. We're recommending family counseling and perhaps some time off school until this situation stabilizes. That evening, I sat both kids down for the conversation I've been dreading. Mason, Lily, I began carefully. There are some things happening that you need to know about. The police are investigating some business dealings that your mother might have been involved in. Lily's eyes went wide. Is Mommy in trouble with the police? We don't know yet, sweetheart, I said honestly. But whatever happens, you and Mason are going to be safe with me. Mason crossed his arms. Dad, just tell us the truth. Are you and Mom getting divorced because she was stealing money? I looked at my 14-year-old son, this young man who was ready to fight the world to protect his family's honor, and decided he deserved honesty. Yes, son, I said quietly. Your mother made some very bad choices. She was seeing another man and taking money from our business to help him. Now it turns out that man might have been using her to steal from other families too. Mason's jaw tightened, but he nodded like a man accepting hard facts. What's going to happen to us? I'm going to fight to keep our family together, I said firmly. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, you two are going to be safe and loved. Later that night, Wade called with more disturbing news. Warren, Detective Collins, shared some information with me. Troy Hendricks disappeared yesterday, cleaned out his apartment, and skipped town. They think Bethany might have warned him. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. If Bethany had helped Troy escape, she wasn't just a victim anymore. She was an active participant in his crimes. The next morning brought a knock on my door that I wasn't expecting. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Collins standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. Mr. Whitman, Detective Collins said when I opened the door, this is Agent Martinez from the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We need to discuss Troy Hendricks and your wife's involvement with him. Agent Martinez was a no-nonsense woman who got straight to the point. Mr. Whitman, we've discovered that Troy Hendricks has been running a multi-state romance scam worth over $2 million. Your wife's financial records suggest she was more than just a victim. They spread documents across my kitchen table, bank records, fake investment portfolios, and communication logs between Bethany and Troy. These text messages show your wife providing Troy with information about your trucking business, including client lists and financial details. Agent Martinez continued. We believe he was planning to target your customers next. My blood ran cold. He was going to use my business to scam people. It appears so, Detective Collins said. Bethany also helped him set up fake bank accounts using false information. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, which carries serious federal charges. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Mr. Whitman, we need your cooperation to build our case. In exchange, we might be able to reduce your wife's charges if she agrees to testify against Troy and help us locate him. What do you need from me? I asked. We want you to arrange a meeting with Bethany, Detective Collins explained. Convince her to come clean about Troy's location and her involvement in his schemes. We'll be recording everything. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown wearing a wire and waiting for my wife to arrive. She walked in looking haggard and nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. Warren, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. We need to talk. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. The police came to see me yesterday, Bethany said, her voice shaking. They're asking questions about Troy and some investment thing. I don't know what they're talking about. I studied her face, looking for any sign of honesty. Bethany, I know about the fake investment accounts. I know about the money you took from our business. The FBI knows everything. Her composure collapsed instantly. Warren, I swear I didn't know what Troy was really doing. He told me he was starting a logistics company and needed startup capital. I thought I was helping him build something legitimate. Where is he now? I asked directly. Bethany's eyes darted around the coffee shop. I don't know. He called me 2 days ago saying he had to leave town for a business emergency. He promised he'd send for me once everything was settled. Bethany, I said, leaning forward, Troy isn't coming back. He's a con man who's been scamming women like you all over the country. The FBI is offering you a deal if you cooperate, but you need to tell them everything right now." She started crying, finally understanding that the man she destroyed her marriage for had used her just like he'd used dozens of other women. "What kind of deal?" she whispered. "Help them find Troy and testify about his operation," I said. "Otherwise, you're looking at federal prison time for fraud and conspiracy." For the first time since this nightmare began, I actually felt sorry for my wife. But sympathy wouldn't protect my children from the consequences of her choices. 6 months later, I was sitting in a federal courtroom watching my ex-wife face the consequences of her choices. Bethany had agreed to cooperate with the FBI in exchange for a reduced sentence, but she was still looking at 3 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit fraud. Troy Hendricks had been captured in Mexico, trying to board a plane to South America, with over $400,000 in cash. The FBI had tracked him down using information Bethany provided during her cooperation interviews. Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s, looked down at Bethany from the bench. "Mrs. Whitman, while the court acknowledges your cooperation in this investigation, your actions have caused significant financial harm to multiple families. You betrayed your husband's trust, stole from your joint accounts, and participated in a scheme that defrauded dozens of innocent victims." Bethany stood with her court-appointed attorney, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. The confident, manipulative woman who'd tried to destroy me in divorce court was gone, replaced by someone who finally understood the weight of her actions. "I accept full responsibility for my choices, Your Honor," Bethany said quietly. "I know that my selfishness has hurt my children and my ex-husband more than anyone else." The judge sentenced her to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. She would be eligible for parole in 18 months if she continued cooperating with ongoing investigations into Troy's network. After the hearing, Bethany's attorney approached me in the hallway. "Mr. Whitman, my client wanted me to ask if you would consider allowing her to call the children once a week while she's incarcerated." I looked through the courtroom doors at Bethany, who was being led away in handcuffs. Despite everything she'd done, she was still Mason and Lily's mother. "Once a week," I agreed. "But I listened to every conversation, and if she tries to manipulate them or make excuses for her behavior, the calls stop." That evening, I sat down with Mason and Lily in our living room. At 15, Mason had grown into a strong, responsible young man who helped me manage the household. Lily, now 13, had struggled the most with her mother's absence, but was finally starting to heal. "Dad," Mason said, "how long will Mom be in prison?" "Probably about 18 months if she stays out of trouble," I replied honestly. "But kids, I need you to understand something. What your mother did was wrong, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. People can love their families and still make terrible choices." Lily nodded, tears in her eyes. "Will she be different when she comes out?" "I hope so, sweetheart," I said, pulling her close. "But whether she changes or not, you and Mason are going to be just fine. We've proven that this family can survive anything." The divorce had been finalized 4 months earlier. The judge awarded me full custody of the children, the house, and my trucking business. Bethany forfeited any claim to alimony due to her criminal conviction. The stolen money would never be fully recovered, but the business was stronger than ever. Wade had become a regular fixture in our lives, helping me navigate single parenthood and offering the kids a positive male role model. More importantly, Mason and Lily were thriving in school and had learned to trust again. As I tucked Lily into bed that night, she looked up at me with serious eyes. "Dad, are you happy now?" It was a profound question from a 13-year-old who'd watched her family fall apart and rebuild itself. "Yes, baby girl," I said, kissing her forehead. "I'm happy because I have you and Mason, and we're together. That's all that really matters." 2 years after the nightmare began, life had settled into a rhythm that I never could have imagined. My trucking business was thriving, with 12 trucks now and expansion plans for next year. More importantly, Mason and Lily had grown into resilient, confident teenagers who had learned that they could overcome any challenge. Mason, now 16, had gotten his learner's permit and was working part-time at the trucking company, learning the business from the ground up. He developed into a natural leader who protected his younger sister and took responsibility seriously. Lily, at 14, had discovered a talent for art and was already talking about studying graphic design in college. She'd also become the family's emotional barometer, always checking to make sure everyone was okay. Bethany had been released from federal prison 8 months earlier and was living in a halfway house across town. Her weekly phone calls with the kids had gradually rebuilt some trust, though she would never again be the central figure in their lives she once was. "Dad," Lily said one Saturday morning as we were having breakfast, "Mom called yesterday and asked if she could take us to dinner next weekend." It would be the first time Bethany had asked for an extended visit since her release. I studied my daughter's face, looking for any sign of anxiety or pressure. "How do you feel about that?" I asked. "I think I'd like to see her," Lily said carefully. "But I want Mason to come too, and I want to come home the same night." Mason nodded his agreement. "Dad, we know who our real parent is. Mom made her choices, and we understand that. But maybe it's time to see if she's really changed." I was proud of how mature and thoughtful my children had become. They'd learned to set boundaries and protect themselves while still leaving room for forgiveness. "If that's what you both want, we'll try it," I said. But the first sign of manipulation or drama, and we're done. That afternoon, I was in my office reviewing delivery schedules when my phone rang. It was Stella Grant, my divorce attorney, calling with unexpected news. "Warren," she said, "I thought you should know that Preston Vale's law firm is being investigated for ethics violations. Apparently, several of his clients have filed complaints about inadequate representation and conflicts of interest." I smiled, remembering the nervous lawyer who tried to intimidate me in his office. "I'm not surprised. He was in over his head from day one." "There's more," Stella continued. "Troy Hendricks received a 12-year federal sentence yesterday. The judge called his operation a systematic assault on the trust that holds communities together. Justice had been served, even if it couldn't undo all the damage that had been done." That evening, Wade stopped by for our weekly barbecue. It had become a family tradition that the kids looked forward to. Wade had never married, and had become like an uncle to Mason and Lily. "You know what I've been thinking?" Wade said as we watched the kids playing basketball in the driveway. "What's that?" I asked. "You came out of this stronger than you went in," he said. "Those kids respect you in a way that most teenagers never respect their parents. They've seen you fight for them and protect them when everything was falling apart." He was right. The crisis had forged bonds between us that would last a lifetime. Mason and Lily had learned that their father was someone they could count on no matter what. As the sun set over Denver, I watched my children laughing and competing with each other, completely secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed our family had ultimately made us stronger. Bethany's choices had cost her everything that mattered, but they'd also shown me what I was capable of when the people I loved were threatened. I'd fought for my children and won, and that victory would define the rest of our lives together. The nightmare was over. The healing had begun, and the future, for the first time in years, looked bright.